Chair, if you'd like to begin the meeting, we're ready.
Yes, sir. This is the October 20th, 2020 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals. Present are Mr. Robinson, Mr. Morrison, Mr. Judon, Mr. Rass, Ms. Riches, Ms. Vargas, and Mr. Bennett. Present from the planning staff are Mr. Batchelder, Ms. Ashby, and Ms. Stepp. These proceedings are being recorded. We ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We'll conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We'll first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We'll then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. First, to hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Second, to grant special exceptions, which is a fact-finding function of the board. And third, to grant variance to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to a particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Ms. Ashby, I believe we have one deferral.
Yes, Mr. Robinson.
Item number 4 on the agenda, 32 Cooper Street. That will not be heard tonight. Anything else from staff?
No?
No, sir.
First item on the agenda is number 284 King Street, 292 King Street, 93 Society Street, and 95 Society Street. Request first 1-year extension of a vested right pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on November 6, 2018, to increase the number of units in an existing accommodations use from 19 to 25 units in a GBA, General Business Accommodation Zone District. Mr. Batchelder.
Back in 2018, the Board of Zoning Appeals gave a special exception approval to expand an accommodations use approval that was already granted for this property by increasing the number of rooms. And each time the board grants an approval, that approval constitutes a vested right that can be extended for up to 5 1-year extensions, provided the applicant, the owner of the property rather, submits an application to the governing authority that granted the approval in the first place. And in this case, that's the Board of Zoning Appeals zoning. So we've received an application from this owner to extend this vested right for 1 year. And I'll just give you a little bit of background. So this is a collection of I think 2 properties, maybe 3 properties that are located on King Street, just south of Society Street. They're in the accommodations overlay zone, and the application came from the architect who's working for the owner. The properties are shown here in this aerial view. Another view, there's an alley off of Society Street right here. That's also part of the property. And this is the site plan showing the ground floor uses, and which will include some retail spaces as well as hotel rooms and office above. And then the plan that was approved back in 2018, this is just one drawing out of the set. The approval. So under the zoning ordinance, which follows the state law, a vested right is can be extended up to 5 times with 1-year extensions, provided it doesn't expire before the application to extend it is submitted to us. And the city zoning ordinance says it shall be approved unless there has been some amendment to the zoning ordinance or other codes that would prohibit the use. In this case, that's not the case. So this vested right, in our opinion, is they're entitled to the approval to extend it for 1 year, and we recommend that you approve it.
Staff recommends approval for the new members. If there are no changes, as Mr. Batchelder said, in the application, no changes in the zoning ordinance, we have an obligation and a requirement under state law to approve it as a matter of right. So we have no particular purview when that's the situation, and Mr. Batchelder has found that to be so and has recommended for its approval. Is there a recommendation from the board for approval?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. I'll call the roll. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Margaret Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson, aye. It's unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Item number 2 is 68 Wentworth Street. Request variance from section 54.415, parentheses E-1, to allow 2 right-angle signs to exceed 9 square feet of sign face area per side and 18 square feet of total sign face area. One sign has 21.5 square feet of sign per face, 43 square feet of total sign face area, and one sign has 25.5 square feet of sign per face, 51 square feet of total sign face area, zone GBA. Mr. Batchelder.
So this item concerns 68 Wentworth, which is the Marriott Hotel on Wentworth, between Wentworth and Society Street. Jeff. Access the property and check in. And on the ground floor, there are some amenities for this hotel. The hotel actually has 2 restaurants. And being a full service hotel. So the restaurants, I guess, have struggled a little bit over the years, but what they're asking for now is a variance to allow 2 right angle signs to be placed on this Wentworth Street facade that will draw more attention to those restaurants in the facility. And so that's the nature of the request. Sign right at the entrance so that guests coming down Wentworth Street know where to turn and that they're at their destination. So they have a wall sign. All right angle signs like you'd see on King Street, Broad Street, those are allowed under this provision. And then we also have a provision in our sign regulations that says that a building can have a large right angle sign in lieu of a freestanding sign. And it can be on this size building up to 40 square feet per face and 80 square feet total. And the vertical dimension is limited to no more than half the vertical dimension of the building facade. Well, and that's not the same standard that would apply to the typical King Street building or Broad Street building. This is a very large building that the hotel sits in. So it's given, in our ordinance, it's given a little bit more credit for that substantial size. And of course, all of this is subject to the BAR's final approval, because within the historic district, the zoning ordinance in the sign section sets forth the maximum size limitations, height limitations, that sort of thing. And then the BAR has the authority to further restrict the size and height and the materials and the colors and all that sort of thing. So all of this, whatever we approve tonight, is still subject to their approval. And moving on, these are photographs of the existing hotel facility. So you see again that wall sign right here. And then this is the 2-story facade or 2-story section of the hotel that addresses Wentworth Street. And you can't quite notice it very well in this image, but I have one later that shows it. But you see these wings on either end are stepped back from Wentworth Street. So on this wing on the left side is where they are proposing to place one of these right angle signs. And that's shown in this image right here. And then the other wing on this side is also proposed to have a sign, and I'll show you that in a minute. But for this sign, this is what they're proposing. So this is a little over 20 square feet, 21.5 square feet. And its placement would be in that portion of the building that is stepped back from Wentworth Street. And if I can get my cursor down there again. So here's an image of what that would look like on that section of the building. Here you begin to see how this wall is set back from Wentworth. And then here's the other sign right here. And this is what that sign would look like. It's larger in square footage because when we measure a sign, we take the outer box of the sign face. And that includes this little flame neon part at the top of the sign. So it makes it a 25.5 square foot sign. So both are substantially larger than the 9 square foot minimum, but I think the applicant has a good case for why they feel this variance is warranted. Again, you see this section of the building set back from Wentworth Street. And here's a up-close image of that section. So here's the portion of the facade that is right up on the sidewalk, right up on the property line. And then this portion, this end portion on either side steps back. And there is a compliant sign. But that sign is so small that it really isn't visible from meeting in Wentworth or King and Wentworth. And that's what this is an attempt to try and remedy, is the limited visibility that this hotel has on a major thoroughfare on the peninsula. And I think it is an unusual circumstance to have a hotel of this size mid-block in one of these blocks between King and Wentworth, and or King and Meeting rather. And I think they've come up with a reasonable proposal to try and improve their visibility for these two restaurants. So our recommendation is for approval. We don't have anybody that has objected to this request. I know that the applicant is on the call here, so I can unmute them if you have any questions or would like to hear from him. But our recommendation is for approval. We feel that they've met the variance test and recommend this to you.
Mr. Batchel,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Batchel, I think a year or two ago, 3 years or whatever, we had the issue of a neon sign come up somewhere else on downtown.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
What was the discussion on that? I can't remember.
That concerned a sign proposed for the building at the corner of King and John Street. And to be honest, I don't remember all the details, but I know that they were just proposing a larger sign than the smaller size limitation that applied to that building. So that's a much smaller building. They wanted a sign, not probably more in keeping with this size that is proposed here. And so I don't recall exactly. That was approved, as I recall, but ultimately it never got put up. Not sure if that was because the BAR denied it or made them alter it enough that they decided they didn't want it. But it's not in place today.
I do remember that. Okay, well, are there any questions or comments from the board? Staff?
Yeah, I have a question for Lee. The slide that you showed us that shows the sign that's currently in place. What did you say the size of that sign was? Because to me, that looks like the appropriate size, even though the building itself is much larger, the street facade seems very much in keeping with the size of the signs that are already there, which I assume is what the ordinance requires. So is that's the 9 foot per side size? The one, yeah, that one that's there now, which I think looks in keeping with the streetscape to me, because you don't see that large, the rest of the large building from Wentworth Street if you're walking. Whereas, so the new sign they're proposing would be practically double that size. And it looked to me like it was going to be coming out from where that.
I don't know the size of this sign, but the applicant is on the call, and I'm happy to unmute him and let him present and answer your questions, or just answer your questions. And if you,
I mean, to me, the scale that's shown there now looks in keeping with the streetscape. And so, yeah, I guess my question is how much big, the size of the new sign looks to be double that.
right.
I think the issue that, listening to Mr. Nightshall's description is that, of course, this is a one-way street here going west, and that sign is tucked back in, and I don't think you can see it at all when you're heading in a westerly direction. I think that was the issue that was being addressed in the request.
Mm-hmm. Well, my driveway is right across the street from that. And I mean, I see it every day. I don't know. I think what they're proposing is too large.
Why don't I do this? Why don't I unmute the applicant and allow him to speak, or promote him? Yes, that's what I will do. So, David, if you'd like to.
Hello, can everybody hear me now?
Yes, and you need to be sworn in.
Okay.
Would you like me to do that?
Please.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Did you hear the question about that existing sign or the sign that's in this photo?
I did. That sign is not an existing sign. That's been gone for about a year since we started work. That was for a previous restaurant. I don't know the exact size of that sign, but I can estimate it based off the size of the bracket that was there. I think that's about 30 inches square. I don't think it's 3 feet, so it's probably not the full 9 square feet per side. So
well,
yes,
there's a sign there now, though.
There is. It's not that sign, though. There is. We got approval for temporary, what we hope to be temporary signs for these 2 restaurants that were conforming and didn't require any special exception.
Okay.
If that sign's 30 inches square, then yes, our sign is twice the width of it, because I believe it projects 5 feet. So as a straight answer to the question.
Mr. Thompson, I guess what you need to do is address the variance and give your hardship.
Sure, I'd love to. So this restaurant has gone through at least 2 significant restaurant failures in the last 5 years. And they made a concerted effort after a remodel of the hotel interiors to try to put in a restaurant that worked. And for a restaurant to work, it's got to have more than the hotel guests. Most of the work that I do is restaurant design, and hotel restaurants are a very special animal because part of the success of a restaurant has to do with the feeling of the dining room and a mix of people, and people want to be where the locals are, and there's no locals that were going to those restaurants. So the particulars of the site and why it is a unique and challenging location is that block has, to my knowledge, no nighttime businesses aside from the gym, which may be 24 hours. I was the architect for Candlefish, which ended up relocating to the corner of King and Wentworth from their previous location, which was almost right across from this. And that had everything to do with visibility. They just had no foot traffic. It was a struggle. And these restaurants have struggled from that as well. They're not going to survive solely based off the hotel. So they brought in a chef who is nationally renowned with a television show and 2 award-winning books. And this is her first restaurant outside of her hometown of Kinston, North Carolina. And they want to make sure that people are aware that they're here and can find them. So the view corridor from King Street and from Meeting Street was what drove the type of the sign and the size of the signs. You'll notice that we were mounting our signs a little bit higher than the sign that was in the previous picture. So I don't think to a pedestrian they'll be perceived as nearly as big as if we were to mount it lower at the current condition. I think even with the size of these signs, they're going to be less than visible, maybe more so from King Street than they will from Meeting. What's not depicted in our renderings are the trees that are there and the neighboring buildings. So I think for, part of us as people that shape the success of the downtown businesses, it's not going to work without customers. And we want to capture some visibility for the nightlife on King Street. We want to make sure people know that there's a reason to walk down that street, because currently there just isn't. So I think it's to the benefit of other businesses and the community at large that this particular restaurant make it. Happy to answer any other questions.
Any other questions or comments from the
I
board?
have a question, please, for Lee, if that's all right. Well, I guess I'll ask the applicant first. It's as far as the size of the signs, why as large as you designed it?
2 reasons. One is I think when you look at the signs on the building that they are proportional to the size of the building. It's a big building. Even the 2-story portion is bulky. And where the new doors, so this is not where the old entrances to the restaurants were. Previously it was 1 restaurant and now it's 2. So they each have their own individual entrance. They did not have entrances directly off of Wentworth Street before. So where those doors and the new stairs were located is set back from the street, which makes visibility even more difficult. So we're trying to reach out and grab some sight lines beyond the face of the building. So the 2 answers being, I think it's proportional and appropriate to the size of the building. And I think it needs to reach out beyond the face of the building to be seen.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask one question of Lee, please, Mr. Batchelder?
Yes.
So in regards to BAR reviewing the signs, if our board approves this application tonight, will it lock in the size, or does it have to go before BAR, who will then have to approve the size and the neon type?
It will still need to go through a BAR review process. And that process could result in the signs being smaller or I guess possibly not being approved at all, but I believe the applicant may have had some conversations with the staff about this, the BAR staff.
So essentially, approval from this board will say, enable the applicant, will give the approval for larger than the 9 square feet.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Batchelder, I have a quick question. Is my understanding is from what I just heard that our approval is for a square footage as proposed, not necessarily for the design or the appearance of the sign, simply the square footage and also the location. Is that correct?
Well, yes, I think that's correct. Yes, these plans clearly show exactly where they want to place them, and you're right. We are not approving the actual design.
Any other questions, any comments from the board? Are there any motions?
Move approval.
Mr. Morrison moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judon. All in favor signify by saying aye. I lost my sheet with the board members on it, but I'll try it here. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon, Mr. Judon,
He froze.
Mr. Judon, are you in favor? Ms. Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Nay.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
yes,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson, aye. Mr. Judon.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
The application passes by a vote of 6-1. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 45 Church Street, Charleston District. Request special exception under section 54-110 to allow a one-story horizontal expansion, bedroom, bathroom, foyer, storage that extends a non-conforming 1-foot north side setback, 3 feet required. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow an addition with a 54% lot occupancy, 35% limitation, existing lot occupancy, 47%. Home SR4. Mr. Batchelder.
This application concerns a residential property on the northwest corner of Church and Water Street. And from this zoning map, which illustrates that all of these properties have a residential zoning, and in the immediate area of this property, all of the surrounding properties are SR4, which is the same zoning that applies to 45 Church Street. But you see a real mix of lot sizes and shapes and building configurations. So the house we're looking at is a historic single house with a rear addition. And what the applicant is proposing is a small one-story addition at the very back of the existing house. So back here. One other thing that you'll notice, you can barely notice, but this is a driveway right here for 2 cars, 2-car wide driveway for off-street parking on this property. These are photographs that show the existing conditions. In the lower right is the front of the house looking at from the intersection. In the left photo, that's a view from Church Street. And in the upper right photo, this is a view from Water Street. And you see the driveway right here, and then the yard beyond that driveway. More photographs. So this is a view, this right-hand photograph is a view from the driveway looking at the back of the house. Here's the existing site plan showing the house, the driveway, parking area back here, and then the yard space that they currently have. And you also see the 1955 Sanborn map, which shows essentially the house that's there today, and more in the backyard, there was a garage or some sort of dependency at the back where the driveway parking area sits today. And this is a site plan showing the proposed addition, which is right here in the darker shading. And you can see that it hugs the wall that is on this property and along the north side property line. So that wall thickness, I guess, is 6 inches, and then maybe there's a little bit more of a distance between the property line and the north side of that wall. So the setback that they are proposing, well, right now it's a 0-foot setback for the main house, and they're proposing to pull this addition off and butt it up against the existing masonry wall. So it'll have about a 1-foot setback off that north side. 3 feet is what's required by the zoning ordinance. And but again, with single houses, of course, this is not an unusual circumstance where an addition is proposed and it requires, it doesn't comply with setback requirements, so it has to come through the board. And in this case, this aspect of the addition, this setback off the north side requires your approval for the special exception to extend the non-conforming north side setback. And so the real issue for the board to decide is whether the proposed addition is an unreasonable intensification of that existing non-conforming building footprint that would impact the light and air flow to the adjoining property. So that's the special exception. The other part of this has to do with the increase in the building footprint. The lot occupancy for this property right now already exceeds the allowed 35% lot occupancy for buildings on lots within the SR4 zoning district. The current lot occupancy is 47%. But that's not unusual on the peninsula, and especially in these older sections of the peninsula. And what they're proposing is an addition that will increase that lot occupancy to 54%. So that requires a variance because they're proposing to increase the lot occupancy. And the applicant is on the call. I think it's fair to say, if I go back to the floor plan showing the 1-story addition, that this is additional living space. And one thing that the applicant points out is that this house has easements on both the interior and exterior. So the Preservation Society has a say in what happens to the interior as well as the exterior of this house. And the owners of the house would like to allow more living space for their growing family without without compromising the integrity of the historic interiors, and using spaces that are otherwise meant for formal spaces for informal living. I think that's a fair way of summing it up. But and the applicant has secured support for this application. If I go back to the image here, both of these property owners to the north have signed indicating that they do not object to the proposed modifications. That's Mr. Jim McNabb and Dr. William Wilson. Both have signed a document indicating that they have no objections. And the Preservation Society has informed us that they have granted conceptual approval for the plans for this proposed one-story addition. So there seems to be no objection from any immediate neighbor that would be potentially adversely impacted by the addition. It's a very small lot with limited space for living for a family, and so our recommendation is for approval of this. We feel that they've met the special exception test as well as the variance test, and I see that the applicant, architect Glenn Keys, is on the call with us, so I'm happy to unmute him if you have any questions or concerns, but our recommendation is for approval of this request.
Staff move is recommending approval. Ms. Ashby, is there anyone present opposed?
No, Mr. Robinson.
With that in mind, Mr. Morrison moves for approval. Ms. Grass seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Judon? Mr. Judon? Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson says aye. Mr. Judon?
I think we may have lost him.
Okay, we have 6
Wait a
members.
minute.
Aye.
There he is.
There he is.
Mr. Judon?
Unmute.
Yes, sir.
How do you vote on this? We've got 6 ayes. You're the 7th voter. Lost him again?
I think we may have lost him again.
Yeah,
We
he's
have,
frozen.
I think, to carry this motion. We have 6 ayes and 1 abstaining. With that, the motion carries and the application is approved. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey.
Okay.